I'm going to raise something sensitive tonight. I'm sorry it's a bit heavy for a Sunday, but it really is important. This week, a Senate committee has been looking into the Babies Born Alive bill. It's a bill that's pretty hard to believe that we need in Australia. The issue of abortion in this country is horribly polarising. And while I'm not a fan, I can understand that there are some people who think differently. It's in the interests of the powerful pro-abortion lobby that it be framed as an extreme issue, though, because it scares away normal people from a conversation about the common ground that most people should be able to agree on here. So I'm going to try and talk about an issue that's related and that should be something all fair-minded people should be able to get behind. Now, when a late-term abortion happens in this country, it occasionally is the case that a child who was not supposed to survive that procedure is instead born alive. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, I'm talking about having a heartbeat, the ability to cry, breathing. I'm not talking about the issue of the point at which life commences, although I've got my own views. This is about the situation when a child that isn't wanted nevertheless is born and nevertheless lives. Some states don't collect data on how often this happens, but Queensland and Victoria do. And between 2010 and 2020, this occurred 724 times. Here's the problem the bill seeks to solve. When this awful situation arises, and I really am sorry that this is distressing, the baby, just born, is left to die, to cry it out without medical care, without pain relief, in some states without so much as the comfort of a hug. A 2018 study in the Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology found that when this happens, the median length of time that the baby is left in which they survive before passing away is 32 minutes. Although in one study, that baby survived for over 4 hours. Now, those who are enthusiastic about abortion say that live births following this procedure are a, quote, pro-life lie. Well, I'm sorry, but the numbers don't lie. Numbers, though, can be so impersonal. So let's consider the case of Jessica Jane. That's a pseudonym for a baby born following a late-term abortion in the Northern Territory, whose experience was the subject of a coronial inquest.
Following being aborted, Jessica Jane was born alive and placed on a metal kidney dish in an empty room for approximately 80 minutes until she died. According to Nurse Williams, who delivered her, Jessica Jane, although premature, was apparently healthy, had no apparent abnormalities, and her vital signs were relatively good. She weighed 515 grams. When the doctor who authorised the abortion was informed of the live birth and the baby's AGPAS scores were strong, his only response was to say, "So?"
He gave no instructions to give the baby medical care, and the baby was left to die where she lay. Nurse Williams checked on Jessica Jane every 10 to 15 minutes and observed crying and movement. Here's what the coroner said. The fact that her birth was unexpected and not the desired outcome of the medical procedure should not result in her and babies like her being perceived as anything less than a complete human being. Similarly, the fact that her death was inevitable should also not have the same result. The old, the infirm, the sick, the terminally ill are all entitled to proper medical and palliative care and attention. In my view, newly born, unwanted and premature babies should have the same rights. The fact that her death was inevitable should not affect her entitlement to such care and attention." Close quote. The coroner here has not put forward an extreme view. It's not even a pro-life view, but it does acknowledge something that is important, that a baby that is born, whether or not he or she is wanted, is a complete human being and entitled to proper medical care. It's absolute madness that we have to have this discussion at all, given the long list of people who seek to adopt a child in this country. The Babies Born Alive bill stands for the radical idea that a baby that is born alive should receive medical care regardless of the circumstances of his or her delivery.
I think that the duty, as stipulated in Section 9, would be to treat a baby in a way that is equivalent to any other baby that is born. So I think I've read in the submission, Senator, that people are concerned that this is going to criminalise health professionals, and we don't want to see that. But the reality is that medical professionals already have a duty of care to babies who are born, and they have to make an individualised clinical judgment at that point. So we're not asking anything more than just that when a baby is born alive and has signs of life, there's an equivalent duty of care.
The bill provides that there should be care standards that are consistent across the country, and that there should be data collected about how often this sort of thing happens and the circumstances that surround it. It stands for the proposition that if a baby is born alive, but even with medical care isn't going to survive, they should nevertheless receive palliative care to relieve their pain as they pass. And that when they do pass, the child should be given both a birth certificate, a death certificate, and the opportunity of a burial. There should be a coronial inquest when this occurs, and that there should be proper, meaningful counselling before a woman decides to undergo a procedure like this, so there's better preparedness for the risk. That's because they are, again, no matter what your views might be on the appropriateness of abortion, these are without a doubt, by the time they have been against the odds born, a human life with human rights independent of their mothers. This shouldn't be a hard thing for parliamentarians to get behind. But no one wants to talk about it. It's unpleasant, and a parliamentarian who does risks being labelled all the nasty things. I know, I've lived it. But the fact is that the status quo is extreme, and it's out of step with the humane society we claim to be. And what harm could a procedure like this do? Well, according to these bioethicists who gave evidence to the committee, Dr. Johnny Sarkar from Notre Dame University and Dr. Bernadette Tobin, answering questions from Labor Senator Anne Urquhart, not much harm at all. Take a look.
Some submitters have advised that health practitioners are already required by practice guidelines to provide palliative care to infants showing signs of life following pregnancy termination. What would be the impact of legislating this requirement?
Well, if you're saying they're already mandated, then having this extra, reinforcement wouldn't really add anything per se if, as you mentioned, it's already mandated. It might have different penalties, for example, or additional penalties. That would be obviously a different story, but if they are mandated, then there's no harm in passing this bill. Even in circumstances, if someone wants to argue there's absolutely no child left born alive, then all right, then this isn't going to harm anyone, so why not pass it in the event a poor human being is born alive, just to protect them?
If palliative care is already required, this bill may be clarifying what duties of care the doctor owes to the child, obviously in collaboration with the parents.
Frankly, it's hard to believe this hasn't simply been given the tick. My next guest gave evidence at the Senate hearing, and she is a Professor of Law at the University of Adelaide. She's a Rhodes Scholar, so she is no intellectual slouch. Dr. Joanna Howe, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Amanda. Great to be here.
Dr. Howe, you come to this subject from the perspective of being a human rights lawyer. What's the proper understanding of the human rights of babies that are born in this circumstance?
Well, I think our starting point, Amanda, has to be the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, where the Article 1 says that every person born has equal dignity and rights. And in fact, the preamble to that declaration says that every member of the human family has human rights. And that's what makes human rights universal, is that they attach to human beings. And so in this issue, we're not talking about babies in utero. We are talking about babies that have been born, have taken their first breath. And as Dr. Johnny Sarkar gave evidence at the inquiry on Thursday, under the criminal law, a human being is a person from first breath. And that is when the law confers personhood. And yet these babies who are born alive after a failed abortion, they fall through the cracks and they are not seen as human beings under the law. So the Queensland termination of pregnancy guidelines actually stipulates that if a live birth occurs following an abortion, that no life-sustaining treatment should be given. And so, you know, that really makes it clear why we need a federal law providing a legal right to all babies that are born in this country. It's simply a matter of birth equality, that we don't divide human beings who are wanted by their parents against human beings who are unwanted. We say that all human beings are persons under the law and worthy of care, protection and have legal rights.
Dr. Howe, why do proponents of abortion describe this bill as, quote, nonsensical or, quote, a pro-life lie?
Look, Amanda, I struggle to get into the head of people that are against this bill. I actually don't understand how anyone could be against giving babies who are born in this country legal rights. I mean, that is not a tenable position to take. And so I think what the abortion lobby is doing is trying to obscure the facts, to act like this is a pro-life lie and to say that it doesn't happen. And, you know, I've seen articles by Tori Shepherd in The Guardian. We heard testimony from the SA Abortion Action Coalition on Thursday. They say this is a rare issue solving a non-existent problem. And, you know, if you look at the health department reports from the 2 states that release data about this issue, so they record it as a neonatal death following an abortion, we can see from that there are 724 babies that are born alive and left to die without legal rights under the law. So this is not a small, trivial matter. And, you know, on average, what that effectively means that in Queensland and Victoria, every week there is a baby who is born after a failed abortion and left to die. So I don't think it would pass the pub test to say that this is nonsensical, a non-issue or pro-life lie. I think most Australians would be absolutely aghast that this is happening. And the only reason it's been allowed to happen is because Australians don't know about it.
So this is, to my mind, a bill that acknowledges the humanity of a baby without making any changes to the existing legal rights of a woman to seek an abortion. For that reason, it seems like all side of politics should be able to get behind it, particularly those parties of the left that like to talk a big game on human rights. Why is it being treated like it's a fringe issue?
Amanda, I completely agree with you. I mean, I was gobsmacked when the Greens came out and said they're not going to vote for this bill. I don't understand how a single parliamentarian who supports non-discrimination and equality and human rights, how they could be against giving legal rights to babies who are born in this country. I mean, you know, you mentioned the case of Jessica Jane. I mean, if we think about that situation, that was a little baby girl that was born at 515 grams with good AGPA scores. She was left in an empty room on a metal kidney dish for 80 minutes, receiving no medical care until she died. This isn't like hospital ramping where a patient is waiting to get treatment. This is a situation where we have patients in this country who aren't even defined as patients because they're not defined as persons under the law. Every single political party should stand for the human rights of all Australians, and these babies are Australians.